Welcome to Modern Crime Scope, where we bring you gripping true crime documentaries that uncover hidden secrets, shocking investigations, and real stories of mystery and justice. Each episode is carefully crafted to keep you on the edge of your seat while shining a light on the darkest corners of human nature. If you're fascinated by real crime cases, missing person stories, and courtroom drama, you're in the right place. Emily Harris was a loving California mother whose sudden disappearance shocked her quiet community, but when investigators traced her final steps, all signs pointed to Daniel Price, a trusted neighbor hiding a secret so dark it would lead to murder, and a chilling truth no one saw coming. The quiet town in California had always been a place where families felt safe, where people left their doors unlocked at night and trusted their neighbors without question. But everything changed the day Emily Harris went missing. Emily was 32 years old, a devoted mother of 2 young children, and a familiar face around the community. She was the kind of woman people described as reliable, kind, and full of life. She volunteered at her children's school, attended local charity events, and was often seen jogging in the mornings along the neighborhood sidewalks. For many, Emily was the picture of stability and warmth, which is why her sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the town. On the evening she vanished, Emily had told her family she needed to run a few quick errands. She grabbed her car keys, slipped on a light jacket, and left with the casual assurance of someone expecting to be gone for only a short while. Hours passed, and when she didn't return, her husband grew concerned. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and by midnight, panic had set in. The following morning, the search for Emily began in earnest. Family, friends, and neighbors gathered together, combing through streets, parks, and wooded areas, calling out her name. Posters with her photo quickly appeared on telephone poles and storefronts, and local news outlets picked up the story, urging residents to come forward with any information. The most disturbing clue came when authorities discovered Emily's car abandoned on the shoulder of a rural road just outside of town. The vehicle showed no signs of forced entry or damage. Inside, investigators found her purse, wallet, and even her cell phone. Nothing appeared to be stolen, nothing out of place, and yet Emily was nowhere to be found. It was as though she had stepped out of her car and simply vanished into thin air. The eerie discovery deepened the mystery and left detectives struggling to piece together what had happened to a woman who seemed to have no reason to disappear on her own. Rumors began spreading throughout the town. Some whispered that Emily might have chosen to leave her family, but those who knew her best rejected that theory. She adored her children and had no history of erratic behavior. Others speculated she could have been the victim of a random attack, though investigators found no evidence of a struggle at the scene. Every possibility seemed more unsettling than the last, and each unanswered question made the community's fear grow stronger. Detectives began retracing Emily's last known movements, speaking to friends and acquaintances in hopes of finding a lead. They discovered she had been unusually restless in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Close friends recalled that she had mentioned feeling uneasy, as if something wasn't quite right in her life. Though she never gave details, there was a sense that Emily had been carrying a burden she hadn't fully shared. That small, cryptic detail added a chilling layer to the case, hinting that her disappearance might not have been random at all. It was the first clue that pointed to something far more sinister than anyone wanted to believe. Investigators began piecing together the puzzle of Emily Harris's final hours, determined to uncover what had truly happened to her. They focused first on her phone records, banking activity, and surveillance cameras from the areas she had visited on the day she vanished. Strangely, there were no transactions after she left her home, and her cell phone showed only one final ping before it went silent near the rural road where her car had been found. The lack of digital footprints was unusual, and detectives knew that someone had likely forced her off the grid. This was not the behavior of a woman who planned to disappear. It was the trace of someone who had been stopped abruptly. Attention soon turned to her personal life. Emily was known for being friendly and approachable. But investigators discovered she had confided to a few close friends about feeling uneasy in recent weeks. She hinted that someone in her life had been making her uncomfortable, though she never gave a name. Detectives quickly realized they needed to identify this person. They re-examined everyone she had regular contact with, from family members and co-workers to casual acquaintances. Patterns began to emerge, and one name kept appearing in unexpected places: Daniel Price, a local contractor who had worked on Emily's home earlier that year. Daniel was a well-liked figure in the community. He had a reputation for being dependable, always willing to lend a hand, and many families trusted him with access to their homes. To most, he was the last person anyone would suspect of wrongdoing. But as detectives dug deeper, they learned Emily had met privately with him several times after her home renovation project had been completed. Neighbors recalled seeing his truck parked outside her house late in the evenings, long after work hours. While it wasn't uncommon for contractors to maintain friendly relationships with clients, the frequency of his visits raised red flags. Detectives also uncovered that Emily had been keeping notes in a small notebook, the same one she carried everywhere. In it, she had jotted down observations about financial documents and repair invoices that didn't seem to add up. Investigators couldn't ignore the possibility that she had stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see. The detail aligned with what her friends remembered. Emily seemed worried, distracted, and unusually cautious in her final days. It was becoming clear that her disappearance might have been connected not to chance, but to knowledge she wasn't meant to possess. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses on the evening she disappeared provided another lead. A grainy video showed a truck matching the description of Daniel S.'s vehicle traveling along the same rural road where Emily S.'s car was later abandoned. Though the footage was not crystal clear, the timing was difficult to dismiss. The realization that Emily may have been lured or followed to that remote area unsettled even the most experienced investigators. By this point, the community's hope of finding Emily alive was fading. What had begun as a missing person case was now shaping into something far darker. Detectives knew they needed stronger evidence before confronting Daniel, but all signs were pointing in his direction. The case was no longer about whether Emily had disappeared willingly. It was about who had wanted her gone and why. When detectives finally turned their full attention to Daniel Price, the investigation escalated quickly. With a search warrant in hand, they combed through his home and property, hoping to uncover something that could explain Emily's mysterious disappearance. At first glance, the house appeared spotless, almost unnaturally so, as if someone had gone out of their way to scrub away any trace of ordinary life. But investigators knew how to look deeper, and it wasn't long before the cracks began to show. Hidden beneath loose floorboards in his garage, they made a chilling discovery: a collection of Emily S.'s personal belongings carefully tucked away in a small box. Inside were items her family immediately recognized: her wedding ring, a scarf she often wore, and her ever-present notebook. Each piece was a silent but undeniable link to Emily, and none of them had any reason to be in Daniel's possession. The search didn't stop there. Behind the shed in his backyard, detectives found a tarp stained with what appeared to be blood. Forensic testing later confirmed the blood belonged to Emily. The weight of the evidence was crushing, but Daniel insisted he was being framed. He claimed someone must have planted the items to make him look guilty. Yet the meticulous way everything had been hidden suggested otherwise. Whoever placed them there had taken care to conceal the evidence, and the likelihood of a stranger sneaking onto his property without his knowledge seemed almost impossible. Investigators also uncovered suspicious financial records on his computer. Bank statements revealed unusual transfers, multiple accounts under different names, and transactions that couldn't be explained by his contracting business alone. While the financial crimes were not immediately tied to Emily's disappearance, they painted a picture of a man who was far from the trustworthy neighbor people thought they knew. It also gave detectives a reason to believe Emily might have stumbled onto something she shouldn't to have. As the evidence mounted, Daniel's carefully maintained image began to crumble. Friends and neighbors who once defended him started to share unsettling memories. Some recalled overhearing arguments between him and Emily when she questioned invoices for her home repairs. Others described how Daniel had become increasingly secretive, often disappearing for long stretches of time without explanation. These accounts didn't prove guilt, but they added weight to the growing suspicion that Emily's disappearance was no accident. For the investigators, the case had reached a critical turning point. Emily's car abandoned with her belongings left behind, her blood discovered on Daniel's property, and her personal items hidden under his floorboards. Each piece of evidence pointed to a horrifying conclusion. The likelihood that Emily had ever left his property alive grew smaller with each passing day. The focus of the investigation was no longer on whether Daniel was involved, but on why. What had driven a seemingly ordinary man to harm a mother of two? Detectives believed the answer lay not in the surface details of Emily's life, but in the secrets Daniel had worked so hard to conceal. The discovery of those secrets would soon reveal a motive more shocking than anyone could have imagined. The district attorney's office began to unravel the truth behind Daniel Price's actions, exposing a motive that was far darker than anyone in the community had expected. Investigators discovered that Daniel had been living a double life, one carefully hidden behind the facade of a hard-working contractor. On the surface, he was known as the reliable handyman who built decks, remodeled kitchens, and helped neighbors with repairs. But behind closed doors, he was orchestrating a secret financial scheme that had been growing quietly for years. He was stealing personal information from clients, creating fake identities, and funneling money through shell accounts to support a lifestyle far beyond what his legitimate work could provide. It was a system that thrived on deception, and Emily Harris had unknowingly stepped too close to exposing it. Detectives traced the trail back to her renovation project, which had started out like any other home repair. Emily had hired Daniel to fix water damage in her home, and during the process, she noticed inconsistencies in the invoices he provided. Some charges seemed inflated. Others were attributed to companies she could not verify, and several checks she wrote were deposited into accounts with unfamiliar names. At first, Emily chalked it up to clerical errors, but her natural attention to detail made her suspicious. She began keeping notes in her small notebook, recording every irregularity she came across. What she didn't realize was that her curiosity placed her in direct danger. When Daniel learned that Emily had started asking questions, his demeanor shifted. Phone records showed late-night calls from his burner numbers, and neighbors noticed his truck parked near her home at odd hours. Investigators later determined that Emily had uncovered enough evidence to raise serious concerns. Had she gone to the authorities, Daniel's entire operation could have collapsed. The district attorney believed this was the moment he made a calculated choice: silence Emily before she could reveal the truth. Forensic analysts reconstructed the final hours leading to her disappearance. Emily's notes indicated she intended to confront Daniel about the irregularities one last time. She likely thought she could pressure him into explaining himself or correcting the errors, unaware of how much she already knew. Instead, she walked directly into danger. Detectives believed Daniel lured her under the pretense of discussing the matter further, then acted swiftly to prevent her from leaving his property. The tarp found in his shed, Emily's disappearance, had shaken the community, but the discovery of her body turned shock into heartbreak. After weeks of searching, investigators located her remains buried in a shallow grave in the foothills not far from Daniel Price's property. The grave was hastily dug, surrounded by broken branches and disturbed soil, suggesting a desperate attempt to cover his tracks. Forensic teams carefully recovered the remains, confirming through dental records that the victim was indeed Emily Harris. The discovery left no doubt that the case had crossed from a missing person investigation into a brutal murder. Families who had clung to hope now faced the painful truth, and the town mourned the loss of a woman who had been loved by so many. the evidence collected against Daniel was overwhelming. Emily's personal belongings hidden in his home, her blood on the tarp, financial documents linking him to fraudulent schemes, and now the recovery of her body created an unshakable case. Prosecutors moved quickly, charging him not only with first-degree murder, but also with a series of financial crimes that revealed just how extensive his secret operations had been. The scheme involved identity theft, forged signatures, and the use of stolen bank accounts. Daniel had lived two lives, one of a trusted neighbor and another of a criminal, manipulating those who trusted him most. The trial drew statewide attention, with news outlets covering every detail of the case. In court, prosecutors painted a chilling picture of a man who chose greed and self-preservation over human life. They argued that Emily S.'s murder was not a crime of passion or impulse, but a calculated act to silence the one person who had come dangerously close to exposing him. Witnesses testified about his unusual behavior in the weeks leading to her disappearance, while forensic experts laid out the damning physical evidence. The jury listened as Emily's notebook, filled with her careful notes and observations, was presented as proof of her determination to uncover the truth. Daniel's defense team attempted to cast doubt, suggesting that the evidence could have been manipulated or planted, but the weight of facts made their arguments weak. The discovery of Emily's body near his home proved impossible to explain away. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned a swift guilty verdict. Daniel Price was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, his double life finally exposed for all to see. For Emily's family, the verdict brought some measure of justice, though it could never replace the life that had been stolen. Her bravery, however unintentional, had exposed a criminal network that might have continued unchecked for years. The community honored her memory with vigils and memorials, remembering her not only as a devoted mother, but as a woman whose instincts led to the unraveling of a hidden darkness. Her story became a warning about trust, deception, and the devastating consequences of greed. In the end, Emily Harris' legacy was not defined by the crime that ended her life, but by the truth she helped bring into the light.